Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome to the Health Tech Sessions of the AHA Scientific Sessions 2021. I see we have a number of participants, attendees here. I'm sure more will trickle in. So I know because the sessions are virtual, I'm sure people are in different parts of the world. So thank you for joining early in the morning or late at night. We really appreciate it. I am really honored and privileged to be here today with a fantastic group of panelists who all of you will get to meet very soon. But the title of our session really is Advanced Digital Technologies for Chronic Conditions. As you can tell, that topic is very broad and potentially can mean many things to many people. So I will try to level set a little bit about what I believe is part of that topic and where we want to focus in on today. And based on panelists or questions from the audience, we can go in any direction that you wish. Briefly, my background. So my name is Malik Majmoud. As I mentioned, I'm a cardiologist. I'm a co-founder and CMO at Bioformis. But prior to this, spent about a decade in Boston at Mass General Brigham and a few years at Amazon as their medical officer. I will let the panelists introduce themselves in a second here, but just to comment on the topic here, advanced digital technologies for chronic conditions could mean and do mean that we can talk about physiological monitoring, patient monitoring, patient management, or disease management, and even more lately, digital disease management, digital therapeutics. I think all of that is in the umbrella of digital tools and technologies for chronic disease management, chronic conditions. I think we'll try to focus the conversation a little bit on physiologic and patient monitoring and transitioning, evolving to patient management. We'll gain from the expertise of the panel here to understand all the various components that go into the actual product or solution to take care of patients. But at the end of the day, the objective for any of these things is really around three things in my mind. How do you improve access to care? How do you improve the standardization and quality of care? And how do you lower the cost of care and do it all in a way that's truly convenient, accessible for both patients, and the experience of the whole workflow is better for both patients and clinicians. I think that objective is probably pretty uniform, and we'll have consensus in that one. So with that, let me go ahead and just turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves and maybe just comment on, of course, their background and maybe say a word or two about their companies or entities they're affiliated with. Let's start first and foremost with Dr. Rashmichah.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining. My name's Rashmichah. I'm a cardiologist at the University of Utah. I'm a practicing cardiologist, so I do see patients. Here at the U, my clinical program has focused on applied clinical informatics, observational study design, and comparative effectiveness. More recently, trying to incorporate real-world use of smart technology, remote devices, and understand how those are currently being used in the climate, which has changed a lot, as you all know, during COVID. And in about a month from now, I will actually be joining the Facebook Health Technology Group as a clinical research scientist.
Excellent. Thank you, Rashmi. Really appreciate it. Let's go to Dr. Jim Malt.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Malt. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called BioIntelliSense. By background, I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon and a serial entrepreneur. Had a stint at Microsoft in its first healthcare iteration and the creation of HealthVault, and subsequently the chief medical officer of Qualcomm. BioIntelliSense is really the culmination of about 20 years of persistence in developing various platforms for remote patient monitoring and exception-based algorithms for really being able to eventually get to a pervasive practice of care that doesn't stop at the four walls of the hospital. So we'll talk a lot more about that here.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Let's go on to Karen.
Hi, Dr. Majmoudar. Thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. I'm the Director of Clinical Services over Life Sciences and Healthcare at PhysIQ. My background is in nursing and specifically cardiovascular disease. I came to PhysIQ and shifted over to informatics because I I believe that there was a difference that we could make in people's lives, not only patients, but clinicians as well, to support in clinical decision making. And what PhysIQ, their technology is really an enablement solution. It enables health systems and clinicians to remotely manage acute and chronic patients. And we do this incorporating wearable biosensors with applied advanced analytics like AI and machine learning, and as well as the contextual information that you would get from an electronic patient reported outcome. And by doing this, we've demonstrated that we can predict episodes of decompensation. And the goal then is to keep patients at home. So as Dr. Malt mentioned, keeping patients home and managing outside the walls of the hospital.
Great. Thank you, Karen. And last but not least, Shri.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Malik. Yeah, I'm Sri Reddy, founder and CEO of RAIN Foundation. Before founding RAIN, I had another company, RAIN Cloud, which was acquired by Hitachi. Before that, I was the first worldwide public sector employee for Amazon Web Services, and I was the lead on Centers for Medicare Modernization Act, which is where I really got inspired with the continuity of care at home 10, 12 years ago. I'm fortunate enough to be able to focus on this problem that I'm passionate about. Our goal at the foundation is to really bring preventative care with a focus on behavioral changes and really make it really convenient and easy and free for everybody around the world. I know it's probably a very difficult goal to achieve, but I thought I'll give it a shot.
Awesome, very ambitious. Thank you, Shri. So with that, I think the formalities are out of the way. Let's jump right into it. I mean, I think this is an exciting topic, obviously very passionate for all of us. So let's start first and foremost with, let's talk a little bit about, for the audience, level set, just how do you actually put together, what are the components of a true remote patient monitoring or digital disease management program? And in terms of from a clinical lens, as you think about managing patients virtually, given the pandemic and everybody had to just do it immediately with or without any infrastructure present, maybe Rashmi, you can start with a little bit of experience that you've had on the ground of how systems have tried to do this and the gaps. I'm sure there are gaps you identify quickly to think about how could technology fill those gaps. And then we can go to the rest of the room and talk about how their companies or what tools are available out there to fill those gaps. But can you start with the clinical perspective first?
Yeah, so I think, most clinicians and health systems pivoted really fast. So it was like March 2020 where Medicare essentially made an immediate shift. They're going to reimburse telehealth across the board, essentially. So like many health systems, ours, there was initially many options, like really just trying different things to move as fast as we could to interact with patients. And our population is interesting because we have a large rural population we serve. So not only do we have to implement new kind of workflows, but also how can we still, give access to the rural populations where in our region, you drive through parts of Utah, there's no internet. So there was a lot of challenges there. I think, looking forward, many people I know agree that the telehealth option should continue to exist. And as you alluded to, there are fundamental problems in our healthcare delivery method today, and a big one being access, and also the lack of sort of a patient-centered approach. It is really difficult to get an appointment and to get in physically to see a clinician. And can we address some of that to make the access faster, make it more efficient, and make it easier for the patient, or in other words, patient-centered sort of approach. And of course, in the course of all this, we don't want to sacrifice value, and hopefully we're increasing value and quality. You could create a new system and maintain the level of quality of value, but gosh, wouldn't it be better if we could increase the quality and value with new systems of delivery of care? And one of the early things that has to happen, and I think hopefully it will happen, is the payment structure for all of this has to change. And maybe some other guys on the panel will comment on this. The next year's fee schedule for Medicare just came out, and there's some stuff in there. It looks like they're keeping some of the payment models to enable this sort of change. But the challenges really are adopting the workflow and making it financially stable and realistic for health systems and clinicians to do this type of work.
Got it. Thank you, Rashmi. So let me take those comments and maybe break this down. I think there's a lot of great ground you covered there, which is hopefully nobody on this panel or in the audience, it's like 85 of us here, would argue that ability to interact remotely through video conferencing or old school audio phone calls or even chat, text messages, ability to right size a communication channel to the right patient population is absolutely a necessity. And going forward, I can't imagine anybody turning back to the way we used to do things, right? Because I used to be in Boston, right? The ability to somebody has to drive 30 to 45 minutes, park in a parking garage for a 15-minute visit is just this insane. So those days are gone, right? But if you now evolve that thinking to say, well, episodic interaction with the clinical care team through video or audio, well, that's obviously a minimum requirement. But then you evolve that to say, well, what about actually managing the condition, not just interacting about it, but actually managing it? I want to get to that level of conversation and say, well, how can we actually do more than just the clinical interaction, which is how the pandemic started? So there, to me, the components are, there's some ability to capture data in the wild, in the home environment. There's some really ability to interpret that data. And there's nuances there. Interpreting data that comes from an ambulatory setting is very different than interpreting data that comes from the clinic setting. And then there's the ability to act on that, take action or intervene on that data. So with that, let me go to different panels here. So on the capturing data piece, I think, Jim, you said your entire lifetime trying to perfect this ability to what can we capture at what resolution or what accuracy and in a form factor that's convenient for the patient, and it's a one device as opposed to 50 devices. Can you comment a little bit on the capturing of the data aspect of this whole ecosystem of patient monitoring?
Thanks, Malik. I think just to follow on, the kind of the premise here, COVID opened up the door for a bit of an epiphany, as you described, for hospitals to realize, hey, I can interact with a patient effectively without dragging them into the clinic and driving and parking and sitting in a waiting room with a bunch of other sick people. But we have to keep in mind the fundamental construct of how we've delivered healthcare hasn't changed for essentially 2,000 years. If you're sick, you see the doctor, and the doctor will see you. It'll be a one-to-one interaction. They'll examine you, collect as much data and observations as they can, make a diagnostic interpretation and a treatment recommendation. Now, the problem is in the 21st century, every other sector of our society has moved away from that one-to-one service encounter to what's called a scalable exception management model. And we're seeing this now with a not just a US, but a global crisis of shortage of healthcare workers and workforce. The problem with a webcam visit is it doesn't change the economic model. It's still the cost of a one-to-one interaction. And so when we talk about virtual care and telehealth, as you described, now we need to be able to take this to the next level and be able to capture data passively on a broad population of patients, essentially what we call asynchronously. What we want to be able to do is, and this also helps with disparities and access. We want to make it start with easy. It has to be effortless. If you think you're going to send a box of equipment to 1,000 heart failure patients and hope that they make all these measurements and send their data in, that's not going to happen. So the first caveat is passive data monitoring. And over the last 10 years, there's been enormous advancements in wearable sensors, and part and parcel with what we're doing at BioIntelliSense right now. Secondly, if you're going to do passive data monitoring and make important decisions remotely based on that information, it has to be medical grade. For better or worse, the consumer wearables over the past decade have been fun. They tell you your steps and they're fun for exercise and fitness. But I'm not sure any of us on this panel are ready to make life and death decisions and make medication changes based on, a heart rate measurement that might be plus or minus 20%. And then thirdly, we have to be in a place where this information is accessible in near real time. It has to be continuous data rather than episodic data. It doesn't do any good to get a little snapshot once a month or once a week, depending on the acuity. But this all boils down to what a lot of us are actually doing with this data, and that's what we call exception-based algorithms. The ideal model is to be able to have all of this rich data flowing in passively, inexpensively, and then apply algorithms that are going to watch that data on our behalf and apply a set of rules and logic and be able to show us out of 1,000 patients who are all being monitored at the same time, even if it's blood pressure measurements. We don't want to look at 1,000 blood pressure measurements every morning on our hypertensive population. What we want to know is which out of those 1,000 are trending, negatively, that they're not being appropriately managed. And so this is really the key to the kingdom. And as was said earlier, now we have upwards of $60 billion of new reimbursement for remote patient monitoring, separate and apart from the E&M visits. So I think all the stars have aligned, and we're at a place where over the next 10 years, I think it will start to erase this artificial boundary of the acute care facility where we're able to make all these measurements and have all this rich data, and then outside of those facilities we basically have no information. That's going to go away.
Yep. Thank you, Jim. Let me just comment a little bit on what you just said, which is that this idea of the exception management is, I think, critical, which is, I think, Rashmi, you started with the fact that with the pandemic, we're forced to quickly, and for a good reason, to quickly find other ways to interact with patients. And then Jim saying, well, great, it's one-to-one interaction, but if you really want to achieve the triple or quadruple aim of healthcare, you have to get to one-to-many. And the only way to do that is to then know which of the many requires my attention at this point in time. The idea of just-in-time visits, could we imagine a world where we can proactively tell patients when they need to see us, as opposed to them scheduling their visits every 6 months, because that's just the way we've been doing things forever, right?
Based on a calendar.
Yes, exactly right. It's on the calendar, right? So Karen, maybe you can talk a little bit about, I know your company has spent a lot of time and effort thinking about the interpretation of data. And I know one of the challenges is true, to be fair, is that it's not always easy to interpret data that's coming from ambulatory settings. And this idea of false positive alerts and the high alarm burden has been really bogged down the clinical care teams into how can we actually manage patients efficiently if this data is just going to flow into Jim's point continuously? Who's responsible for it? And how many resources will I need to manage the data? And do they want to get paid for this stuff? So maybe you comment on how data science and machine learning algorithms can help us with that process.
Sure, thanks. So that's a great point, and I think in the early stages of the capability of getting continuous data, folks like us and maybe folks in more nerdy AI, we're just excited about the potential of continuous data. But practically, as you mentioned, it's not practical for a nurse or physician to look at streams and streams of thousands of patients of averaged minute heart rate or averaged minute respiratory rates. That's just not feasible, and it really doesn't point you to any meaningful clinical direction. So that's where, as you mentioned, the machine learning or AI comes into play. And what we've done at PhysIQ is worked on those complex algorithms that Jim mentioned to hopefully point us toward when is a person really getting sick. And the way this works, and believe me, this, machine learning is not where I grew up. I grew up just managing heart failure patients in a clinic, but that's where I felt the pain, right? Is like, why wouldn't we know sooner? And how we know sooner is by symptoms. Unfortunately, symptoms, as we all know, are late indicators. And even with the champion studies in CardioMEMS, increased PA pressure, while that's great to be able to treat on that, we know that something is physiologically happening sooner. So how do we develop signals that point to that without overwhelming the clinical user with tons of signals? And the way that you do that is one of the first trials that we did, which was a randomized control trial with VA patients, which published in Circ in 2020. The Link-HF paper showed that you could put a sensor on 100 vets and look that had heart failure and gather all the data that you can get from a biosensor, and then just do a regression to figure out which of those variables, and there's hundreds of them that can be derived from these sensors, which of those variables point to a decompensation. So you do this as an observational study and you do the regression, and then you look back and say which of these variables aligned that happened so many days commonly before an event. And with that, that's how you develop an index, basically. Now, you can do that observationally. Now we're doing the interventional trial to see just what you mentioned. When is it too noisy? When is it not noisy enough? And then you can fine tune it. We've done the same. And I'll say too, the interesting thing that I think this will come down the line is that we know that heart failure patients, about 50% of them get admitted for reasons other than heart failure, right? So this index pointed to an acute event. Half of them were heart failure and half of them were bronchitis or sepsis. But the point was, it pointed to a decompensation before a clinical manifestation. And now recently, we've done the same thing with patients that were positive for SARS-CoV-2 to look at when, and this was, this is when the immediacy of the pandemic really pushed science forward. We needed to do that because of lack of hospital beds. How can we safely manage people in the outpatient setting? So we reproduced that study with COVID, but used it in a real world model. We didn't, we built in the workflow around it so that the clinicians could treat or intervene if necessary. And that our first phase of that data just came out in Nature Digital Medicine, but it's really developed using machine learning and AI to develop that fingerprint, if it will. And this will continue to get better and better the more data we have and the more studies like that we do.
Great. Thank you, Karen. I think that's great. So I think we've covered two critical pieces here, right? Which is capturing of the data, what Jim talked about, interpreting the data that I think, Karen, you just alluded to. I guess let me go to Shri here next, and let's put it all together, right? These components are great. They're sort of getting into just tech. But I want to take a step back and say, at the end of the day, we're trying to manage patients, and the clinicians are trying to figure out what actually matters in terms of patient management and making clinical interventions. But can you talk a little bit about challenges and opportunities in actually implementing and deploying a system for actual virtual, let's just call it virtual care or remote patient monitoring as a component of that? And just logistically, how do you get, when I used to be at MGH, we used to talk about this, also people, process, and culture, right? So the people part is also as important as the tech part here. So can we talk a little about deploying these systems in the clinical care settings?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Malik. Yeah, so let's think about collecting all these metrics today, right? So then they have to, we have to have one blood pressure cuff, one weighing machine, a different device for different, readings, right? But even beyond that, like how do we make sure that if you ask a patient, are you taking your medication? They say yes or no. Like how do we really know whether they have kept track of taking their medication properly? How do you get that data to the treating physician, right? And it's a very difficult problem. We all know from a behavioral perspective, what sounds very simple to just take weight is a very difficult thing to do. Just like asking people to wear a mask for COVID, and we all know how difficult that is, right? So I think what is needed is solutions that make it very convenient and embedded into lifestyle that makes this data capture easy so that we can apply the algorithms that Karen is talking about and then get to the treatments that Jim is talking about, right? So at a minimum, at least a low fidelity thing that gives a benchmark. So it probably does not give you a proper high fidelity EKG or blood pressure reading, but on a day-to-day basis, it gives you enough swing or variation to go take a proper reading, right?
Mhm.
So thinking about creative solutions such as, we're working on something like a water bottle with a pill compartment that you can carry everywhere. And you just take your pill and drink water. It automatically measures medication adherence and hydration adherence. And there is as long as they have the discipline to load the pills, and so if they're going on vacation or anywhere, it's, of course, the tech is using all the IoT solutions and all that, but for the end user or for the patient, it needs to be so low tech and so embedded into lifestyle. It's not whether we talk about elderly population can or cannot use. I mean, I've grown up with technology, but in that health condition, I don't want to use a tech device, right? I want to just go about making a life, right? So that's how can, and same way, instead of just focusing on asking someone to take their weight, can we let them go about their life if they're using their cell phone every day? Some of the algorithms like you're talking about, can we facially detect variations that tell that there's potential fluid accumulation in the body and ask them to check instead, right? So how can we come up with these kinds of creative solutions that are very patient-centric, that bring this all together, right? Fundamentally, the outcome is driven by that patient doing what they're supposed to do.
Great.
And
Thank you, Sri.
I think that's
Yeah, thank you. I want to open it up. I know we're mindful of time here. We have about 18 minutes left here. The audience, please type in your questions in the chat window. I'm monitoring them. Neil's monitoring them. We want to be able to answer them for you. I'll do one last round of question, and then we can jump to hopefully audience questions. I do want to take. Oh, please, Jim, comments.
If you don't mind, I actually want to respond to that. Sri,
Yeah,
we couldn't agree with you more. So what we've been doing at BioIntelliSense is actually building out that truly effortless data capture on the part of the patient, and this has been kind of the Achilles heel for the past 20 years for scalable remote patient monitoring. Number one, the cost of all that equipment. Number two, the complexity, and number three, it's having one device that measures this, another device that measures that. And so long and the short of it is we built literally nothing more than a wearable sticker about the size of a coin that has a 30-day continuous battery life. So it doesn't require any charging or anything on the part of the patient. It's literally stick it on and forget it, simplicity on the part of the patient. This is an FDA 510K Class 2 medical device that is measuring 20 simultaneous multi-parameter vital signs, symptomatic and biometric measurements, and with a clinical accuracy has FDA clearance for in-hospital and at home. And the key is having all of this rich signal, heart rate, respiratory rate, temperature, sleep, body position, gait analysis, fall detection. And to be able to do that, this is actually measuring all of these parameters on a minute-to-minute basis. So we're getting 1,440 measurements of temperature and clinically reliable heart rate and clinically reliable respiratory rate. And what that does is allows us to have the ability to have a composite picture of what's happening with this heart failure patient. We can see their movement pattern. We can see how they're sleeping at night and whether they're sleeping at an incline. We can see whether their respiratory rate is starting to trend. We basically have a 4K movie of these people across multiple parameters. And it's just a treasure trove of a new view of someone where we can apply these algorithms and machine learning capabilities, and this really changes the game, and because there's no effort on the part of the patient in the 30 minutes that we've been on this call, I'm wearing a sticker and it's measured all of my vital signs 30 times without any effort on my part. And that's really, when we're talking about, teams that are interested in data science, we're going to see things that we've never seen before. We actually think we're going to be able to obviate the need for daily weight measurements when we can see, heart rate, respiratory rate, body position with such high fidelity. A lot of the things that we've done traditionally and thought we were important information are going to drop out. We're going to learn new things and see things that we haven't before because we've just never had this kind of information outside of the hospital.
Rashmi, do you want to comment? So like you're itching
to say
something.
No, I'm looking at the chat and there's a lot of activity going on. So I'll try to pull it together a little bit. So one person asks, how do you share that information with the patient and clinician? And one person asks, is the data monitored in real time? And if it's a critical value, is the patient contacted? And putting those two together, another really question there's who is the purchaser for this product? Is it the patient? Is it the individual clinician? Is it a health system? Is it the employer-based insurance plan? Who is this targeted toward?
Well, that's the exciting thing is these new RPM codes. It took a long time. It was part of my obsession over the last 20 years. We literally started this journey in 2010. By 2015, an AMA CPT code committee was created, and it took 2 years to render a new set of codes. That came out in 2017. Medicare adopted them. It takes another year for them to cycle through the fee-for-service schedule. So they went live in January of 2019. And it's literally $60 per patient per month that pays for the technology. And then an additional $50 to $80 per patient per month for the physician practice time spent reviewing that data, which is 20 minutes per patient per month over the course of that entire 20 minutes. So, and effectively the eligible patient population under the Medicare criteria is for both any acute and or chronic conditions. And it's really not very limiting right now. So as long as there's a medical necessity for some type of data collection, you'll see both Medicare patients and actually the broader Medicare Advantage population is now paying for this pretty consistently.
And I think
the model is,
well, I was going to say it's the RPM as well, the remote patient monitoring, but it's also looking at it from a value perspective. As we move toward value-based care and bundled payments, the idea that you could more cost effectively manage someone just as well, if not better, in the outpatient setting and also avoid readmissions, that having an intelligent system like this allows you to do that. And I think someone else was asking about, we all want to know in healthcare, they want to know where's the evidence of that. And we're working on it. There's been some early work with David Levine on this, but we're moving toward that. And I think also if you look in the space of hospital at home, there's already a current payment model that I actually encourage everyone to talk to your legislators about to maintain that, because that again moves the episode of care outside the four walls to a place where the patient would prefer to be and where we can deliver still that same level of care with this type of technology.
There's also one more question about how we can apply this to, other conditions outside of heart. So I just want to really, give a shout out for what AHA is doing in that space. And we've been, even though we have been, working closely with the Implement HF team, but the approach, that, really the AHA guided is keep it in these fundamental principles like medication management, vital management, symptom management, nutrition, exercise, and stress management. And so that, once we have that kind of a basis, it can be applied in baby steps to many diseases. Fundamentally, it comes down to these 6 pillars in many diseases. But it is true that there's a lot more work and proof that needs to be, more studies and proof points that need to be funded for each condition, but at least we have a base for it.
Yeah, and I think the pediatric one is interesting because my impression, my husband is a pediatric cardiologist. I'll just put that out there. The risk tolerance appropriately is much lower in that population. So the level of evidence to completely disrupt the way we're managing and delivering care will have to be different in that population as well.
This has been a fantastic conversation. Let me just take a few seconds here to just summarize the overall flow of data. In this, I think there's a lot of questions around just the logistics of how this happens. I think all the companies in the room here and outside of this panel, I think it's pretty standard. So let me just walk you through it. So I think most of the times, the way these solutions are structured, there's an ability to capture data through continuous or episodic sensors and devices in the home environment. Majority of the times, those devices are Bluetooth or wirelessly connected, and the data flows to either a smartphone or the cloud directly through cellular or Wi-Fi networks. And that data, for the most part, is real-time or near real-time for continuous monitoring sensors. For episodic data, is the same way, or it can also be manually entered. Once the data goes to the cloud or on some kind of dashboard for the clinical care teams to visualize, this is where, Karen's point earlier and Jim's point, there's some level of sophistication most companies have now to interpret that data in a way that's not overwhelming for the clinical care teams, whether it be exception management, alerting. There's ways to synthesize the data to just allow care teams to focus on the patients in need and not focus on the patients who are already doing just fine. So it's not like they're going to thousands of patients every single day, right? That's the operational efficiency comes in. And then there's the ability to integrate that data into clinical workflows, whether it be a separate dashboard, which is embedded within the electronic medical record or embedded within the actual iframe of the Cerner or Epic or what have you. There's also dependent complexity. You can integrate the data directly into your electronic medical record, the vital signs themselves, or just some kind of summary view. That's usually the flow. And then, of course, on the action front, then clinicians usually will contact the patient. And this is actually an important point we should at some point debate or talk about, which is the right balance between tech and human touch, right? At some point, when all of this happens, to close the loop, some humans, somebody in a care team who has a relationship with the patient, who they trust and respect, will have to reach out and actually communicate, if not confirm, communicate the actual intervention to make sure you're not just completely leaving the patient and family members out of the view here, to say, here's what I believe is happening. Here's what I want to change your medications on or monitor differently. So I think there is that human element here. But I think the goal here is to say, can technology drive scalability? And it's never about technology replacing. It's all about scalability. And that's, I think, the key point is in terms of value-based care, it's all about quality and cost. So we want to reduce the operational cost. And that's the key component for technology. Anybody want to comment on that?
Oh, Malik, that's music to my ears. And I'll put on I'm on the board of the American Telemedicine Association, and I'll put that hat on. This is not an either or proposition. The beautiful thing about virtual care is, as you just described it, the human touch is the key aspect of care, and the technology is simply a way to find. What we want to do is deliver better care, frankly, to more people at a fraction of the cost. And what the asynchronous data collection does is allows us, instead of the haphazard model, how we apply our healthcare resource right now based on a calendar schedule for when you need a visit, we can now be much smarter based on the data flowing in and say, okay, who needs, if we're seeing an alert or notification, okay, now's the time to reach out to that patient and verify, hey, is this happening? Because we're seeing something that is an aberrancy, and we're going to be proactive. And what this also does is it moves us from essentially an episodic model of care to a continuous care model, so that we could see things, as Karen nicely described, earlier in their course. What we want to do is be able to know who needs attention and who doesn't, and be able to spend more time at the top of our licenses with the people who need our attention. And then a webcam visit makes perfect sense. And if we need to send somebody out to the house, we have the data to know who needs a house visit versus a webcam visit. And I can tell you with great confidence, we will look back 10 years from now and giggle at the way at the haphazard, disparate way we used to apply our healthcare resource. And it's all because of this blend. And the last comment I'll make is we'll know we're there. A lot of people always ask me, when will we be across the finish line on this? We'll be across the finish line when it becomes just like all the other things. If you think back 20 years ago, we used to talk about online banking or e-trade or online shopping. Those descriptors, those adjectives have actually gone away. We just talk about shopping, as shopping. and where do we shop? We shop on Amazon, but it's just shopping. And so I hate to say it, we'll know we're there when we stop having these panels talking about digital health, because it'll just be health. It'll just be in the fabric of what we do. It'll be silly to send somebody home without a sticker that can continue to monitor them after they just had a heart transplant 5 days ago. I used to send people home, and we still do, say, good luck, we just cut your chest open, and now you and the family here, watch for these 5 things and let us know if you're having any problem. Otherwise, here's an appointment to see us in a week.
Good point, Jim. There's a question. I want to just make sure we address as many questions as possible here. There's one question which I think is a good one around the AI models. And I think, Karen, you mentioned this, not everything has to be AI. There's some simple low-hanging fruit. It's just like, just rules and algorithms. There's some of the data science, but even in the data science world, the question was really around, how do we know that what the model was trained on is representative of the real world population? Maybe a quick comment on that one, Karen.
Yeah, thanks. So that is near and dear to my heart, because I think hopefully people have read about disparate data that's put into the AI machines. And so if the data in the AI algorithm is only as good as the data itself and the patient data that patients it came from. So what you want to do is have as diverse sample in that data set as possible. The way that you achieve that is just trying to amass these data lakes to make them just as big as you can. And so when you're looking at an analytic system, our goal is to gather as much data as possible to make our AI and machine learning algorithms as good as they can be. And one exercise that can do this, which applies to all clinical trials, is that when I mentioned our work in COVID, we partnered with the University of Illinois Health System that serves a greatly underserved and very diverse population. And in those 1,000 patients, about 48 or 49% were Latinx, and about 38% were African American. So in that data pool, you get a diverse, not just cultural, but ethnic and race diversity, as well as a gender balanced diversity. So that's what feeds into the algorithm. Now, these algorithms with machine learning, the beauty of it is it always improves the more data that you put into it. So you create, for example, in this case, an index that we think points to when someone's going to get sick from COVID, and then you continue to add more data and retrain it. So there's that, but there's also with the systems that we have where we machine learn against ourselves, the patient. So the system learns what's normal for that patient. I always compare myself to my dad. My dad's got COPD, and his normal is not the same as my normal. So we throw basically out the window population health norms, and then we create alerting based on what's normal for that patient. And I'll say too, just to wrap it up, because I saw the question in the chat, is that these algorithms can be 510K cleared. And we have 4 that are 510K cleared. I think Bioformis has some that are 510K cleared as well. But that's, there is a threshold. It's a new process with the FDA, but there is a threshold so that clinicians have some level of confidence being put out there.
Let me We have a minute left. Let me just do a wrap up here. I want to comment from everybody on the panel here. Let's, we've been talking about remote patient monitoring for at least 6 to 7 years at this point, but with the pandemic, everything's accelerated. So what I want to hear about from the panelists, what is your vision in terms of the next, I don't want to say 5, 10 years, literally the next 24 months. How do you see this evolve in the near short term, the next 24 months? Just comments on that as a closing comments here. Let's just go around the room. So start with Rashmi.
All right, thanks. So many fantastic ideas here to think about. So I'm not sure I'm exactly answering that question, but the way I think about this is try to think in simple terms. So it's some data plus some model plus some implementation should equal some value. This is the framework under which we're operating here. Mm-hmm. The model, I would say, is the least important part of that equation. It's the data and it's the implementation. Mm-hmm. And speaking to the data side, we talked about making sure you have diverse populations. A big piece of that is, of course, you want diverse populations as much as you can. But if you're, let's say, a Medicare Advantage plan or an employer who's going to buy some of this technology to manage the health of their population, the data needs to represent that population. Mm-hmm. So we treat a lot of rural patients. Is this model representative of those rural patients? I don't know. So that's where I think the data piece is hugely important here. And then, of course, implementation, which we've talked about a little.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Rashmi. Shri, quick comments?
Yeah, so I'll just give you a practical example of what we did. In COVID, there was a CDC algorithm that if you had existing preconditions, what is the risk if you were to get COVID? That had to be implemented in India in multiple languages in WhatsApp as a conversational bot. We are actively taking that, just applying the same assessment for any post-acute, post-op surgery. Do I need to come back to see a nurse or a doctor, right? But the fact that that's been adopted and it's very applicable, I just see a lot of such things that were innovated for COVID are very applicable in simple terms to real life. Yeah.
Great. 30 seconds, Jim.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see, and we're seeing it right now, is the same thing that happened over the last 24 months with telehealth and hospitals basically getting a Zoom cam capability. We are now seeing before our very eyes, literally every health system in the United States and major payer rapidly adopting not just pilots, but literally full-scale remote patient monitoring capabilities, because it is now an obvious adjunct to telehealth. But even more importantly, I don't know if you saw the data, but healthcare systems have spent an additional $43 billion of expense on healthcare labor compared to the previous year. Now, COVID notwithstanding, we're looking at a healthcare crisis of workforce that's predicted to not go away for at least 5 years, and being able to have passive monitoring devices both in hospital and at home, nursing homes, long-term care facilities. We just don't, when we talk about critical access hospitals out in the rural area, those critical access hospitals are shutting down because they can't find any nurses to staff them. So these technologies are actually going to be a godsend to being able to actually do the monitoring and actually at a lower labor cost point with more frequent data. So what you're going to see is almost irreversible when people start to experience more frequent, better monitoring without the additional labor cost. And it's, again, no one should be threatened about their job. It's not an either or proposition.
Thank you, Jim. Last but not least, Karen, very quickly, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think in the next 24 months, you'll see the leading health systems continue to pursue embedding these platforms and these virtual care models into how they manage patients. I think that the payers will be getting on board with that. We see early signs of that. I think as far as nursing is concerned, you're going to Jim's point, you're going to see transition to different types of nursing that will be delivering and engaging with these platforms. And I see that the AI algorithms will get better, and every day the sensors are improving, not just chest-based sensors, but wrist-based sensors.
Excellent. well, everybody, thank you so much for an engaging discussion. What I will do is we'll wrap up this part of the session. We have 15 minutes where Shri is going to do a little demo. So please don't leave just yet. And then the session will officially end at 10:30. So thank you again. Big round of applause for all the panelists. And then Shri, go ahead and take it over.
So what, as I said, the idea, I mean, I'm presenting as Rain Foundation, but I have to really, really call out AHA. And in the first team happened to be the Implement HF, the heart failure team. And the goal here, in pushing this health equity is how can we create these more accessible and affordable solutions for care at home in local languages, to be able to continue in local languages, and then that suit in their lifestyle. And pretty much everything that we're building, at Rain at least, is all open source, so anybody can use it. And then the service we provide is free, right? And very soon this will also be available within the AHA App Store. So the idea, as I said, is how can we focus on like these pillars, right? Nutrition management, stress management, and exercise management. These are obviously important, whether you have any health condition or not. But if you do have a health condition, then how do we make it easier for medication management, vitals management, and symptoms management? The goal, I mean, while understandably, like all this conversation, the focus needs to be very much on where the patient interacts with the doctor. That's where the most important thing happens. But outcome is really driven by what the patient does with that advice and what information can they bring back. So when they come back to a follow-up visit, or when they're at home, are they doing the right things to be able to avoid emergencies? And then they can, in the US, it may just be, the payer paying things, but in general, some other countries, if they have to pay out of pocket, how do we generally improve outcomes for these patients? But for providers too, it's better patient engagement, so they can, if we are successful in processing all that data and, take the data that the patients bring along with them, they show a screen of how their weight has been, changing, of the trends of if they had chest pains, and there's also a daily check-in type of thing that generally where they're feeling better or worse every day. What was their energy levels every day? So they can, the doctor can see these kinds of things and make better and informed decisions. And, hopefully it will reduce the visits to the doctor so the doctors can see more patients and scale their service, right? So that's the goal behind the platform. And again, doing it in such a way that the monitoring is easy. And even if bringing things like if you don't feel like opening an app to enter the values, you can just say things. And you can say that in your conversational language. So back to the AI machine learning model question that came up earlier, just in our own experience for nutrition management, we first said, it'd be really cool to just take a picture and we automatically detect the portion sizes and calories intake. But then, we found that's a very complex model to build. I mean, everybody knows, not that we found, but but if we change the setting, in the US, people could be eating, like pasta, pizza, different things, different days. But if you go to some rural parts of the world, they're consistently eating one kind of food. Like in rural India, it's like rice and curry, for example. That's a relatively easier model. But then, while working through that, we figured, do people really want to take a picture, or is it more convenient for them to just say what they ate? Right? So it has to be so easy for them to say what they ate, and we can determine the calories easier. So the point I'm trying to make is, practically not just running around trying to build models, but there are easier ways probably for us to, benefit both the patient as well as the doctor. I'm going to show how we use the Rain Health Guru app for daily check-in and to track symptoms, vitals, nutrition, etc. When you first open the app, You get a check-in once a day asking how you're feeling. Let's say I indicate that I'm feeling better. Then you get asked, how is your mood? I'm happy. Then how is your energy level? You're able to get off the bed, climb the stairs, exercise. Let me say I am able to exercise. And now I'm done with my daily check-in. You can now keep track of your symptoms. You can mark your symptoms as getting better by swiping left to right, or worse by swiping right to left. And once I'm done with my symptoms, I can then indicate my medications. So I get my reminders of the medications for morning, afternoon, evening. If you want to add another medication, you can go into add medications and you can add a medication. You can also select an icon to remember a particular type of medication. And once you respond to your reminders, the history of the medications can be tracked on a monthly basis. You can also track your vitals, like weight, blood pressure, blood glucose level, blood oxygen saturation, pulse rate, body temperature. And you can track the trends of those vitals that you can share with your provider when you meet them. You can mark your nutrition in terms of what you're eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or a snack. Over time, we'll make it much easier for you to track these just by interacting with text and voice. So for example, I can say my medication, and then it will show that I need to take in medication immediately. So likewise, in future, we will be able to interact. If you're not in a mood to touch a screen and you just want to interact and get responses, you'll be able to do so with either texting or voice recording. There's also knowledge articles that can be pushed specific to a health condition that one can either watch, listen, or read in this knowledge window. If in case of an emergency, by pressing that bottom right button, you can indicate that there is an emergency if you end up having to go to a hospital. Also, there's handy phone numbers that you can have, like a doctor, nurse, a social health worker, and a family member that you can launch a phone call or a text message. You can also upload your records, medical records. In future, we're also going to be adding a capability to be able to comprehend a record. For example, if there is a discharge summary of 50 pages, we make it easy to create a one-page summary of the medications that were given or the symptoms that were exhibited during that admission. So it's an easy way to share that as you go from one provider to another provider. Once the care plan is integrated, as we discussed, you'll start seeing, today you'll see only medication reminders here, but once the care plan is integrated, you'll start seeing actions related to nutrition, exercise, meditation, etc. in this care plan to make it easy for you to go through your care plans. All right. thank you for attending the presentation and watching the demo.
5 minutes left in the session. So if
Yeah.
folks have any burning other questions, we can use this time to answer them. I think maybe I'll say one last comment from my side, because I couldn't say it earlier, is, I think to everybody's point earlier, I do strongly believe that the adoption of virtual care solutions, whether it be just remote monitoring or remote disease management, is gonna significantly increase over the next 24 months for sure. But I do believe, I think somebody commented in the chat about earlier, that we do need more evidence though. I do want to say from a cardiology perspective, historically, remote patient monitoring programs have not been all that successful in showing benefit in true randomized controlled trials. I think practically speaking, with the pandemic and elsewhere, there's many other reasons besides to adopt it, but we want to generate the right clinical evidence to showcase that the quality of care and the clinical outcomes are that much better through this continuous monitoring. In addition, in those studies, we also want to do the economic analysis to show the operational efficiencies. Because I think when you look at a healthcare system as a whole, people wear different hats. And I think as clinicians, we always focus on clinical outcomes. But that misses this point that Jim just made. There's $43 billion in labor spending. Even if you had a non-inferiority study, but had significant savings on the cost side, that is still a home run, right?
Yeah.
Given all the challenges we face. I think we just have to make sure that we have many different perspectives in the clinical trial designs and not be overly indexed on just financial or clinical or access, but all of those matter. For different populations and different systems, different geographies, different things will matter more than others. So I think just that ability to have a comprehensive study is critical. Jim, comment.
Well, Malik, the other key aspect when you look at basically the failure of remote patient monitoring studies over the past 20 years, one of the the fundamental flaws in everything that you see is the mistake of trying to take the current practice of how we do things and you add technology to it, but you haven't changed the fundamental model. So if you do a heart failure study of 50 or 100 patients with a blood pressure meter and a weight scale, you're missing the whole point. This is, now we're finally going to, and we're going to see this. I mean, I can tell you, biointelligence, we've got hundreds of thousands of devices now, on order and being implemented worldwide. We're going to start to see data sets of tens of thousands of patients rather than 50 or 100. And it's a whole different game to be able to apply a study and say, okay, let's look at the economic benefit, let's look at the safety and outcome and efficacy.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point, right? Like, there's going to be scientific discovery from this data. There's going to be somebody notices a new pattern that could send you to a new treatment target. But a big piece of this is using what we know better across larger populations. And we've talked a lot about delivering care, but really, gosh, I would just love to deliver health, get people healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
You're here.
And with that, someone asked, there was a question in the chat about how do you design the approach to that? Well, I think, and I just got back off the heels of AMIA, and it's looking at co-design, where if you work in a co-design model and you pull in the people that are delivering that care, you can bring them along and teach the technology. They can talk about their pain points of care delivery, and you meld the two together. It can't be laid over a model that we know doesn't work. It has to be integrated into that. And the best way to do it is through collaboration.
Yep, agree. And I think other comment I'll make in the last second here is also to recognize that I think as this field evolves, the role of the clinical care team is also going to evolve in terms of who is responsible for different aspects of care. I want to use the terminology carefully here, right? The nurse coordinator, the clinical nurse, the nurse practitioner, the advanced APP, or the clinician, the cardiologist. Like there's so many pharmacists included. Sorry, there's so many role groups here. I think we're going to see evolution of how we think about those roles, what role they play, and how can they contribute to the healthcare system, and even health coaches, right? Non-skilled workers. So anyways, I think that's another area to watch out for. for both for the purposes of patient convenience and relationship building, but also cost, right? So for both of those reasons. With that, it's 10:30, we're right on time. Thank you very much again, the panelists, for great discussion. Audience, thank you for your great questions. Hopefully this was exactly what AHA and Pat expected as a kickoff to the health tech sessions. Good luck with the rest of the sessions, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Enjoy the sessions.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.